Welcome to Relish Books. Today I am going to talk a little bit about my favorite book of all time. And when I say it's my favorite, I don't mean that I think it's the best book ever written. I don't think it's the greatest classic of all time. It definitely has flaws, but it is just my personal favorite book, that book that I come back to over and over again. That just like, I feel like everybody has that book that like came to them at the exact right moment in their life, and it's always going to be their favorite. Um, for that reason, if nothing else. But there are also a lot of really good reasons to have it be my favorite, and it is The Book Thief by Markus Zusak. This was published in 2005, so I guess it's almost 20 years ago now, which is pretty crazy, but it's still not old enough to be considered a classic. And while it's, you'll see it on book lists sometimes, I'll see people reading it. Um, it's kind of well known, but at the same time, I feel like it's not talked about very much. Um, and so, I don't know. For that reason, and of course, because it's my favorite, I want to talk about it. Um, and it is my favorite for a lot of reasons. One of the largest reasons being that it is a book lover's book. Um, it's really written appealing to people who love books, who connect with books. And it's a story that should be a book. I remember I saw the movie years ago before I'd read the book, and I thought it was fine at the time. I was like, oh, that was a fine movie. Nothing super memorable, nothing super special. It was pretty good. And then I read the book and I was so blown away. And I really felt like, this is a book that should never, ever be a movie because it's a book about books. It's a book about words and the power of language and how words and language have um, saved this girl on so many levels. So it's a World War II story, and of course, the most startling thing as you start the book is that it's narrated by Death. He is a character in the story who is the narrator, and sometimes there's a lot of chapters where he's just sort of talking, and then there's a lot of chapters where he's telling the story. And it sounds a little odd, it sounds a little maybe over the top and cliche or something. A war story narrated by Death, but he does it so well. And, looking back, I can see now, I've read the book probably a half a dozen times, and I can see now some flaws in it that I never, that I didn't see at first, when I first read the book and on multiple rereadings. I felt like it was just the greatest written thing in the world, just the most amazing, amazing masterpiece. I was just in awe of it. And I still have a lot of those feelings, but at the same time, I can see and I can admit, even though it's kind of hard, that it is somewhat overwritten. It is kind of exaggerated. Some of it is pretty showy and blatant. You feel like the author is maybe showing off a little bit in some of his words. He plays with language a lot. He will use words that aren't descriptive words to describe things, which I really love. I actually love when an author can do that, to swap, adverbs for adjectives and vice versa, and mess around as long as they're good enough to pull it off and not have it feel weird. And I think for the most part, he does a really good job with that. Sometimes it's a little much, but I really, really like it. Um, and while I love the writing, um, there are so many lines in this book that I'll just read and just stop and think about. And that happens in so few books. I can't really think of another example where I do it to that extent, where each line is just like this, it's just like this smack, and you like, it kind of stuns you and you stop and think about it and absorb it. And it's so incredible. The descriptions are amazing. Um, and yeah, when I first read it, I thought I was mostly dazzled by the writing. But on looking back, I think Markus Zusak's great gift a great just personality that he has, I suppose, is not so much in his writing, although that's very unique, and I haven't really read anything else like it, but it's in the characters. And when you have the blend of really good writing with really great characters, of course you're going to have a great book. And he does something that I haven't really ever experienced any other author doing, in that when you're reading the book, they're really good characters and you love them for themselves. But you feel this sense of how much the author loves his characters. And he kind of commits that writer's sin of inserting himself a little bit, because you can feel the force of the writer just loving his characters so hard. But it's forgivable because his intense love for them, you just can't help loving them too. Um, and you do, again, for their sakes, but this added force of just like, you can tell he's so excited about them. Not that it takes away from the story in any way, but just the way that he paints them for you, the way that he describes them, the way that he gives them these moments. You just see his um, incredible love for them, and it definitely comes through, but it doesn't become too distracting. Um, because again, the characters are so well done and the dialogue is excellent. Sometimes he can have those moments when he like overwrites, or things are a little too exaggerated. A lot of the time, those are in the chapters that are not directly with the characters. Anytime that you're directly with the characters and they're talking together, the dialogue is excellent. It's very punchy. They feel real. You feel like you're there with them, and you really come to care about them for themselves. There are so many themes in the book, so many different kind of little plot lines that tie into the main plot, so many ideas that it feels like he had that's really incredible, that he managed to bring them all into one book, and it doesn't just feel like too much. Because it is a lot, there's all these main characters. Liesel is the most main character, but then you get lots and lots of chapters on her best friend Rudy, and then there's Max, who's the Jew that her foster family hides, and you get his whole story. Um, you get chapters from the perspective of her stepfather, who's probably the most lovingly done character, and definitely one of the best. It's kind of like this, I don't know. It's so hard to pick a favorite character. They're all so, so well done. Um, it's not, and again, it's a very large scope of plot. There's a lot of different plot lines. There aren't a ton of side characters. Most of the characters that are in it are kind of main characters, and there aren't, and all the sub characters feel kind of important in their own way, but there aren't an overwhelming amount of them, which is nice since most of the main characters get a lot of time. Um, Something that I love about the book too that makes it really special is all the like crystallized moments in it. There are so many individual scenes that just stay in your memory. And a lot of the time with a book, there's like maybe one scene that really does that, where that's like this special scene that like is frozen in your brain that you'll see over and over when you think of that book. And The Book Thief has a bunch of them for me. There's all these little moments um, that you feel like a writer probably tries for so hard and so rarely achieves, and he just does it over and over. Um, and if I had to pick one to mention, I don't know if mentioning it really does anything if you haven't read the book, but just as an example, those little moments that you look for, and there's, like I said, there's a ton in the book, but I guess the moment for me, like the quiet moment that I think about in the book, is a scene where Liesel's just going out and doing jobs with her stepfather, or her foster father. He's a painter, and there's this part where somebody that they do a job for like gives them some champagne, and there's just this little moment where they like where Liesel tastes champagne for the first time, and it's this memory, with her foster father. It's just this little moment, and it really sticks with me. And there's so many other things like that. And the climaxes are really good too. It's just such an amazing book. Something that is also unique about it is that with Death as the narrator, there are some contradictions in what he does with that, but he doesn't believe in surprises. So he tells you throughout the entire book which characters are going to die. He'll be like, "Oh yeah, this character is going to die pretty soon, and it's going to be really sad." And he'll like tell you that. And so you'll feel like you're prepared for it. You'll be like, "Okay, well, it's not going to be a shock when all these people die, because I know he's been telling me since the beginning of the book that all these people are going to die." And you still feel it as much as if you hadn't known when it happens. It's just as emotional, or maybe even more so. It's really astounding. You feel the weight and the blow of their deaths um, just as profoundly as if it were a shock. And I think that's just amazing that he can do that. And again, there's a little bit of contradiction in that he'll be like, "I'm not going to surprise you with anything," but at the same time, there are things that he definitely chooses not to tell you because he's not going to tell you everything. So there's a little contradiction there, but it's still really fun the way that the narration works. I think it's very different. And again, it doesn't sound like a terribly original idea to have this war story narrated by Death, but he makes it feel just like something that's revolutionary. At least it felt that way to me. And I read the book when I was pretty young, and I like picked it up. My older sister was reading it, and I have this copy, which is a very beloved copy. It was already kind of beat up when we got it, and it's become a lot more since. And I remember my older sister was reading it, and I wanted to read it, but I wasn't like, I don't know. I never do this, but I actually opened it and read the last line. That's the first part that I read, was the last line. And I don't even know why I did that, because like I said, I never do that, but it made me want to read the book so bad. That one little line, I was like, this is something I have to read. I was immediately hooked by that line. And then the same feeling when I started the book at the beginning. It's dramatic for sure. It's a very dramatic opening, and some people might be a little turned off by it. To me at the time, it was perfect. Like I said, I can admit now that it's a little overdone maybe, but it's still so good. But anyway, this one, my older sister has marked a lot in because she was kind of pre-reading a lot of stuff for me at the time. And so there's actually a lot of like curse words blanked out in it. So I also have this copy that I got from my husband because I knew he wouldn't appreciate reading a book that had stuff blanked out. I will say though, this is the cover that is more commonly sold. I am so glad that I have this one because I think this cover is infinitely better. I think it just fits the story perfectly. I think whoever did it really had an insight into kind of the feeling of the book. Whereas this one's just whatever. And this font is horrible and I hate it. But yeah, I also have this one. And so yeah, if anybody cares about that kind of thing, there's a lot of cussing in the book. Not really super strong language, just a lot. A great quantity of profanity. And this is something that I want to make a note of that because, again, Markus Zusak is such a master of language. And while he uses a lot of strong language in his books, all his books are kind of known for that. he doesn't do it the way a lot of other authors do. I really dislike it when authors just cram their books full of strong language and it feels like they're doing it just to do it. Like maybe they're being like, we need to make sure that you know this is an adult book because it's got all kinds of adult language, but it's just stuffed in there for no good purpose other than just to do it. And so many authors do that. So many modern authors do that. And there are particular words that are like fads. So you pick up, a book that's recently published and it's just full of this particular word just because it's a fad and it doesn't add anything. And I hate that. But Markus Zusak, while I don't necessarily appreciate how much language there is in the book, he actually uses it as a character tool. He isn't just cramming it in there. He's so intentional with all of his writing, with all of his language, that it doesn't feel like he does it just to do it. He uses those words just as much as he uses any other words to further his plot, to further the characters, and they feel real. It doesn't feel like it's just stuffed in there. It feels like this character uses these words and this kind of language, and this other character does it in their own particular way. So again, while there's a lot of language and I don't necessarily like that, I do really appreciate that at least he is intentional about it. So much language is just sloppy, and he is not that way. He is fully intentional with his language. It really feels like it's a character thing rather than just doing it. So I just like to make a note of that because that's something that bothers me with a lot of modern books that I feel like he's kind of an exception to. And yeah, there's so much I could say about the book. I was intimidated to do a video about it because it's my favorite book, and I feel like I've talked to so many people about it. I've written so much about it. I'm sure I'm just leaving tons of things out. But ultimately, I think a large reason why it appealed to me so much, and especially at the age when I read it, was that in a lot of ways it's a love letter to language. It's a love letter to books and how books can help us and save us and from certain situations. The light that they bring to the world, the importance of books, and it's just really powerful. And also, family and friendship and all those things play into it. But ultimately, it is a book about books. It's about words. It's about, I feel like I really connected with it in so many ways. But one big thing was that I always feel like books are like my thing. I was not good at any subject of schoolwork. Sometimes it feels like there's something, something that you're just no good at. It took me a really long time to learn to read. And I feel like Liesel had such a hard time learning to read. And then learning to write, it was so slow and difficult. And then ultimately she gains this empowerment through language. And I don't know, maybe that's partly what really connected with me, because sometimes I feel like even if I can't do anything else, I can read books, and they add so much to life. And I don't know, just the power of words, power of language. I don't know. It's a really, really special book, and again, even though you know what the ending is going to be like, the narrator's telling you all through the book what the ending is going to be like, I still cry so hard every time. And I don't usually cry in books, so it's also special in that way. And I didn't just do it the first time, but I have every time since. And so yeah, those are just a few thoughts on my favorite book. I might have to talk about it more in the future because I'm sure that there's so much more I could say. But anyway, thanks for listening. I will see you next time.